Hey y'all, I thought I'd do a video that will kind of be a more intense and I guess calm, comparatively speaking, to what I will be doing with Jason on Saturday night and talking about the shadow. What I'm sharing is specifically inspired by Psychedelics Today on Instagram and the interview with Dr. Ido Cohen and Kyle Buehler. It is a coursework that I'm doing. And so because I am working with the shadow for myself and also for clients, I want to know everything and anything I can about it. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what the shadow is. I have some notes because I want to make sure I really hit the finer points versus kind of go off on a ramble. A lot of people ask me about shadow work. What is the shadow? They're scared of their shadow. It's, their demons, it's their darkness. And so I would like to somewhat demystify the shadow and kind of reclaim it as something that is beautiful and powerful. When we work with it, we get authenticity, we get power, and we get agency. In particular, when we're working with it with psychedelics or plant medicine or whatever medicines that will bring the shadow up in a gentler way. It's obviously why the government doesn't want us to have access to this in such a non-regulated fashion or a legal fashion, because it is a threat. And go down to my notes. Okay, so let's demystify this shadow here and what the shadow actually is. What is the shadow? It is everything that is not conscious. It's our thoughts that we have no relationship to. So we can't even make a connection to our shadow because it's repressed. And so it's a part of us that we don't know. It is unknown. And it's whatever is beneath the light. And so what we have to do is we need to unoppress it. And the shadow, I've kind of looked at, I call it my dragon. That's just the language I give it. It's kind of like my inner child in a fit of rage. It usually wants to be seen and heard and loved and honored to some degree, but everybody can have a different relationship with it. The key really is to begin with self-awareness and observing the parts of you that almost feel like a possession. And shamans view the shadow like a possession. Anytime you're out of control and you are taking something that's down here, you don't even know what you're not aware of your trauma, and it's coming up and projecting outward at somebody with little or no thought to like stop it. And so I call it my dragon energy. That just works for me. And so it's greatly influenced, obviously, by parents and society and culture and news. And then there's also this collective shadow that is going on in the world. And you know how they say the millennials, like they don't give a shit. They're so entitled, but really it's a matter of desensitization. They've been exposed to so much through social media that it can almost seem like they're aloof and disconnected, when in actuality, they're probably just taking on more of the collective shadow of what's happening in humanity, which does them a disservice of disconnecting from their own individual shadow. And so that's something I'm not going to go into. But culture in general represses our shadow because it's like, you need this, you need that, and it just enhances our inner critic and thinks we need all of these things outside of ourselves in order to make us happy, therefore abandoning self-betrayal, and not tapping into our own shadow. We just continue to focus on the problems in the world, not have to look at the problems within. So the shadow is, the ego. It takes control. It wants to stay safe. It wants to self-preserve. It wants to minimize pain. And, to demystify what shadow work is, a lot of people think it's like this intense, dark corridor, and I'm going to, face all this stuff, and I'm going to be in the pits of despair. And they don't really know that you can balance it with beautiful things, play and creativity and somatic experiencing and breath work and yin yoga or movement or breath or journaling or painting. It's not this, doesn't need to be this doom and gloom. In fact, the more yin and yang we balance the dark aspects of the shadow work with the light aspect, it's like this other kind of analogous feature within ourselves, that we also are using this balance of these light and darks in order to do this work. And so for me, as deep and dark as I've gone through open relationship and being like in bed for days, crying and trying to figure out what's going on, and also getting out and hiking and moving and dancing and experiencing with psychedelics and plant medicine. I've kind of run the gamut with kind of everything and anything that I need in order to not lose my shit. Because if you go into intense and you don't balance it with play, and you walk around talking to yourself and you're, spiraling and cycling and projecting all over the place and then going into the pits of despair, you're not going to be very functional. So you have to balance it, balance the deep, dark corridors with a hike. You got to somehow create this balance. And that really will help release the fear of knowing that it doesn't always have to be so dark and intense. So as the observer of your shadow, the icky parts that are coming up that want to put on any of the masks of the ego, control, possession, fear, attainment, shame, guilt, inner critic, all of these things that come up within us that don't sound like love, that's not our high self, that's our shadow. And so if we disconnect from the noise, we have an environment, hopefully, that supports our vision and relationships that support our vision, and we go inward and we sit long enough to feel what's coming up, and to kind of self-realize and ask the questions like, did my punishment, did my projection, did my energetic vomit fit the crime? Did it fit my pain relevant to the situation and circumstance that triggered it? Often it doesn't. And in that moment, what do? We usually run to a partner or we jump on a call with a friend. We don't sit with ourselves and self-source and soothe and figure out what is that feeling trying to teach us. And maybe it's saying, go run out in the neighborhood, go jog, go do something. Maybe it wants us to move our bodies in order to talk. And we don't always have to just sit in that painful space. And so it is an integrative process. What else can I share? So yes, need an environment and relationships that support your vision. So if you are finding yourself in a place where you can't get yourself into a space where you're feeling like you're growing and evolving, and you're feeling like you're continually revisiting old wounds, you probably don't have an environment and or relationships that support your vision. And possibly you may be guided into getting other forms of guidance and therapy modalities to help do it. And likewise, that includes psychedelics and plant medicines, of course, under therapeutic trained shamanic guidance, I recommend. Hopefully that helped demystify a little bit of the shadow. I'll be talking about it with my partner, Jason, in a much more kind of light and funny, playful way as it relates to how we fuck up our connection to self and our connection to those we're relating with, and how do we shift our frequency inside doing some of this work integratively in relationships so that we can broadcast the frequency of the relationships we want. Because so often the very thing that we are trying to avoid in relationships, we actually call it in because we're not holding that frequency. And so we wonder, why are all these relationships suck and what's going on? And we don't even understand our own limiting beliefs and our conditioning, and how it's going to manifest and play out in our relating experiences. So we'll be talking about that live in a playful, fun way on Saturday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Bye.